My name's Carl Polachuk, and for those of you who are not familiar with me, I am a blogger and a podcaster, and I've written 15 books, and I'll be happy to chat with you about those later. Today we're going to talk about sort of the most important piece of your managed service business, which is your service manager. For some of you, service manager is just one of the hats you wear. So I guess we have the polling. And is that going to come up here in a minute? There we go. So how well does your service manager help the service department focus on making every hour a profitable hour for your company?
What's the scale?
Best to worst. So 5 is best, 1 is worst. And if you are the service manager, you just have to answer these questions for yourself. How good are you at making every hour a profitable hour? This is a question a lot of people don't remember to ask themselves in their business. You know, sometimes your hour is spent marketing, and sometimes it's spent delivering services, and sometimes it's spent doing other stuff. But everybody in your company should be focused on this, and it's the service manager's job to bring it, make it real for your employees. So it looks like somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% are in the 1 or 2 range. 40-some, 43%. All right. So at the end of the day, your job in your business is to make money. So you're going to do lots of other good things, but one of the things you need to do if you don't want to retire poor is put some attention on making money. So looks like only about 30% of the audience doesn't need to watch this slide deck. All right, next question is, how well does your service manager mentor technicians on every aspect of their company? So again, if it's you, how good are you at mentoring your technicians? The opposite of mentoring, the 1s and 2s here, I'm assuming is a sink or swim environment. Right? So about half of you have a sink or swim environment. All right? And finally, how well does your service manager conduct quarterly roadmap meetings with each of your clients? So this is the business planning piece of your business, meeting with clients. I have to tell you, I would argue this is the single most profitable thing that you can learn today, is to have regular business meetings with your clients. If you meet with them every quarter, and even if they won't meet with you every quarter, I guarantee they'll meet with you at least once or twice a year and talk about it from a business perspective. Because technology is great and we get excited about it, but they don't pay you money for technology. They pay you money so that their business is more profitable. Right? They get to stay up, they get to do what they do. So the number 1s and the number 2s are almost 75% of the crowd. I promise you this is a very, very profitable thing you can do. There's a lot of people who have avoided getting into managed services because break-fix is perceived as being more profitable. Once you begin to manage your entire client's network, including the business side of it, you become very, very profitable, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you make money just because their stuff broke. We want to make money because their stuff works. All righty. Process and people. So there's 2 different ways that you can look at business. And I don't want to say you shouldn't be people-oriented. You should have a people-oriented business. But when you're looking at how you design job descriptions within your company, you shouldn't do that based on the personalities of the people you have right now. Right? There's 2 ways to look at it. You can build a job description based on processes and procedures, or you can build it based on the personalities available to you. In a very, very small business, we tend to build the job descriptions based on personalities. And the problem with that is that the best that you can do is the best that the specific person in front of you can do. right? And so down the road, that person eventually is going to leave. How many of you read The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber? Okay. Great, great book. The rest of you should read it. It will change your business by Monday. But let me tell you, the lesson that I have to learn every year in that book is I hire somebody, I give them work to do, and I rely on them, and they do a spectacular job, and then they leave because people get old, get married, move to another state, take another job. Stuff happens. Life happens. So they leave, and the lesson is I always want to just take that work back and do it myself. And I can't do that if I'm going to grow the company. I have to have that job be a specific thing, and I need to fill it with somebody who can do that job. So I can't have a business that relies on the specific talents of the people that I just happen to have employed at this moment. So if you have a process-oriented business, the advantage is that you can define specifically what you need done in that job. You can hire somebody who has those skills, and then once they really learn that, you have the opportunity to increase the skills of the person that you've hired for that job. You can actually bring them up to a higher level, and once you hand over that process to a person, then your business can get better and better and better. The alternative is if you say, well, I'm a people-oriented thing, I've got this guy who's really good at voice over IP. Okay, so now I'm going to sell voice over IP, and he's going to deliver it, and he's going to do an amazing job. That's cool, but when he leaves, do you still sell a voice over IP? Do you now have to go find somebody to do that? Do you have to learn it yourself? Do you stop selling it? That doesn't make any sense, where if it's process-oriented, you determine what your business should look like, who your clients should look like, what you want to do. And so for me, in the scale of things, I want to be farther on the side of process, right? So I want to define the things my business should do and then hire people into that. And then once they're there, I can raise their skill level, which raises the quality of the services that I'm able to offer into that market. Does that make sense? And I'm very interruptible, so if you guys have questions, just raise your hand. So let's look at your org chart. In your org chart, again, for some of you, you fill every box, and that's cool, but eventually you want to grow your business. At the top, there are the owner of the company, the manager of the service department, the sales manager, so forth. Those are things where it's harder to replace those with processes. At the bottom, it's much easier, right? So especially as we move to the cloud, you do not need somebody who's an MCSE in order to set up somebody with cloud services. Setting up cloud services is essentially an administrative task, right? We're going to log onto this website, we're going to create a user, we're going to put these names and these passwords in, here's the email addresses, we're going to populate Active Directory, click, 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 click. It's literally a set of checklists. And so you don't need to be paying somebody $60,000, $70,000 a year as a network engineer to do that task, or $40,000 to be honest. It's an administrative task. So as you push things down like that and you have checklists and you standardize your processes, you can provide a high-quality product at a lower and lower price. It's the basis for which franchises operate, right? They standardize the processes, and then they push them down to lower and lower skilled people, still maintaining high quality, right? So you can go into a Subway sandwich shop, and it's going to be the same quality everywhere because they have processes that are very powerful, right? You go to different restaurant chains, and it's going to be the same experience. When you go to a Renaissance in any city, you should have the same experience because it's based on processes. So there's a philosophy called finder, minder, grinder that is common especially in the legal field, but basically there's three functions in your company. Somebody has to go find the work, somebody has to grind it, which is deliver the work, and somebody has to be the minder who takes care of the business as a business. And so today, this entire day until whatever, 8 o'clock, your job is to be the minder. You're here to figure out what you can do, take notes about how you can change and improve your business. So we're going to look at the minder role today. The service department is the grinder, right? So in any service business, actually delivering the service is the minder piece. And at the top of the service department is the service manager. And the service manager touches every important piece of your business. They manage a relationship with vendors, they manage the relationship with clients, they manage the relationship with your front office, your salespeople, with obviously the employees in the tech department, right? That is the hardest job in any service business, is to be the service manager. And one of the things that Terry mentioned this morning is that you should not hire a salesperson until you're pretty well along in your process. And the reason is that you are going to be better at sales than anybody else. And so early in the process, your first hire should be an administrative assistant who can take a lot of work off of your plate, and it allows you to spend more time selling and delivering services. From there, you should then hire somebody to help you get leads, and then you should be closing that stuff. But it means at that point, you need to turn over the technical stuff to somebody who can run the service department. When you have that, it's almost like a magic formula, right? You've got somebody running the service department, and they can manage the clients, and they can manage the technicians, and that frees you up to go do sales, and you can grow your company, right? You need a lot of sales to be able to pay the salary of a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 salesperson. And you're not likely to have that for a long, long time. So the step before that is to be able to put out the sales yourself and hire somebody who's going to run this department. So the service manager has got a little bit of finder, a little bit of minder, and a lot of grinder, right? But they have to be a very specific personality type. It is hard to find a really great service manager. If you've ever tried to hire a good salesperson, you know that they, are very, very rare, especially at the small end of the market. And a good service manager is just as rare. And what I would encourage you to do is to not take your best technician today, elevate them to service manager, and think you're done. That will very frequently be the worst decision that you could make. You really need to look at the process and put the process in place and then hire to that process. Please memorize everything on the left. You can get this slide deck. There's a link there, or you can send me an email, or just let me give you my PayPal information. But this is a link. You can also just Google almost anything at SOP Friday and look for a service manager. We've got a lengthy description about what the service manager's job is and what the roles are. And it's a very big job. And but it starts with defining what that role is and what you expect from your service manager. That then allows you to hire the appropriate service manager, put out an ad that fits your process, and then go screen somebody and make sure you get somebody who can actually do all those things. And you need to be flexible, and you need to be patient, because it takes a long, long time to build a really great service manager. And if you've ever had a really great service manager, either when you were an employee or after owning a business and you hired a really great one, you know that they're very rare and absolutely as valuable as anything. In general, there are two people in your company who should always earn more money than you. One of them is eventually when you hire a salesperson, and the other one is your service manager. They should know that they are the most valuable people in your business, right? Because you get to then take home all the profits, so your salary can be lower than theirs, and it's okay. So we're going to talk about, what you need to do to make this change and some of the habits and the processes you need to put in place. This is a really great book, The Power of Habit. One of the things he talks about is how habits are something that become automatic. And there's great research that habits actually, when they become very powerful, your brain stops thinking about them and they become automatic. So when you say, well, I want to make sure that we enter all of our time in the ticket, and we open a ticket for every job, and we always put our notes in the ticket, and we document all of our time, blah, blah, blah. All those things that make you successful, all the things you're going to hear from the front of the room today, those can become habits, but it means that you have to work on them. And when they become habits, they become something you don't think about. The hardest thing to do in a managed service business is to get technicians to put in their time card, right? So one of the ways to do that is you need to build habits around. We put all of our time into the PSA, and we pay based on the time that's in the PSA, so we track all of our time between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if you want to get paid for 40 hours, you put 40 hours into the PSA. Even if some of that is to say that this is time that you were in training or whatever, it may not be billable to a client, but you're still on the job. Those kinds of habits, once you do them enough, the instructions for those habits get written into the basal ganglia of your brain. And so your brain doesn't have to think about them in great detail consciously, right? What happens is habits become a set of instructions that are literally executed as a group in the base of your brain. And you all know this if you've ever moved from one house to another. The next day, you're driving home from work and you start to go to the old house, right? It's because you're not even thinking about it. You're on autopilot, literally on autopilot. Your brain is executing those instructions. That's what I do at 5 o'clock. I go to this house. So you can do the same thing in your business. Build that habit. The other thing is, a lot of the advice that people hear up here, they hear it again and again and again, and they go, oh, I just can't do that. I can't sign contracts. I'll lose all my clients. I can't raise my rates. I'll lose all my clients. I can't be tough with people. I can't have minimum standards, right? And it's all about fear. And so you have to overcome that fear, because at the end of the day, there's no way for you to grow without changing. Doing exactly what you did yesterday will get you exactly where you are today. And you can do that for 20 years, except that our entire business is built on a shifting environment, right? Technology is changing so fast. So you have to be able to face the fears of change and just say, look, I know the world's going to change, so I'm going to participate in that and help to mold it to be the way I want it to be. How many of you have ever used a DISC profile? Okay, so for those who haven't, DISC is this really great, it's a personality profile, and there's different kinds of personalities in the world. And if you go to hire the right service manager, what you want to do is you want to get somebody who has just the right mix of skills. A really great technician is going to be high S and high C. A really great service manager is going to be higher in the D and I categories. You want somebody who really knows their stuff and is willing to sort of push the rest of the people. And that doesn't mean that somebody who's high S or high C can't be a great service manager. It's just when you're looking at the big picture, it makes it a little easier if people fit into certain categories. So the thing about being a mix of these things is everybody in your team is going to have a different set of personalities. And so you want to make sure that if you only use DISC for one hire, it should be for your service manager to really see if they're a good fit. I would recommend that you do a DISC for yourself. And if you're not using DISC profiles today, talk to Eric Simpson. He's here. He can help you. He's got a very reasonable price thing where he will just help you to get DISC profiles for your team. And it's good for the team to sit down and talk about this, because some people have a different way of just viewing the world. I always used to say, you know, that technicians are from Mars and the receptionist is from Venus, right? Technician walks in and says, I'm going to be working on the server. Boom, disappears. And the receptionist is like, what just happened here? You know, you didn't say hi, you didn't tell me why you're here, you didn't tell me what you're doing or how long you're going to be, or right, anything. You just come and show up, and you know, she's thinking that you're very rude. And the technician is thinking, you know, I'm focused on this task and I need to make sure that it gets done, and I'm just going to do that and be very, very efficient. So they have different ways of viewing the world. And so you have to actually train your technicians to stop and say, you know, part of your standard operating procedure. We stop at the front desk and we say, hi, how are you today? And then we say, I'm going to be at the server. I'm going to be making these adjustments. It's going to take me about an hour. If you have any questions, let me know. And then if they've got anything to tell you, they can tell you. But at least they feel like they've been greeted and you've met them on their terms, right? And it's the service manager who has to train the technicians to do that, which means the service manager has to have those skills. Your service manager, as a rule, is going to have better people skills than the technicians, right? So the reason that you're in this room and the reason that you know, business owners are successful is they've got a great mix of these skills. But technicians generally don't. Technicians generally are very, very focused on a specific set of skills, which is why, you know, they all want to sit in cubicles with their headphones on. So So when you think about the skills and abilities you want, the service manager needs to be really good at shepherding people, you know, of being good at saying, here's what we're going to do. It requires that you have regular training. So if you don't already have a regular weekly or monthly training, I absolutely recommend that. One of the things about building processes and procedures, I can give you a list of 165 things that you should be doing to have a successful managed service business. And you know, one of the things I do with coaching clients is I have this onboarding process and I ask them all these questions. They come up with where you stand on these 165 variables. But you can't fix 165 things at once. You can't implement 165 policies. It's not humanly possible. What you can do is pick the one most important thing that you need to do in your company, put together a policy, and on Monday morning have a meeting and say, starting right now, we're going to do this. Are there any questions? Here's how we're going to do it. Here's why we're going to do it. Here's where it fits in the big picture. And you talk to them about that. And once they understand why they're doing what they need to do, then you spend the rest of the week, everybody talking about that and encouraging each other and asking, did you put your time in the ticket? Is there a ticket for that? Did you put your notes in the ticket? Right? When you push and push and push like that, the group as a group grows the culture of always working off of a service ticket, putting their time in the ticket. But it's the service manager who has to make that happen. If the service manager doesn't do it and the service manager doesn't talk about it, nobody else is going to talk about it, and they're not going to support each other in that, and they're not going to build that habit. Once you do that for a week, then you pick another thing that you need to implement, the next most important thing in your company, and you write a process about that, and you implement it on the Monday morning meeting, and you spend the next week doing that. And so over the course of a year, you can build the 50 most important habits in your company by doing that one at a time. And if you decide to do it, you know, every other week in order to have more time to build the habit before you add the next one, that's fine too. But you can do this. Remember, absolutely nothing will happen by itself. So if you want to have your business change, that means that come Monday, you have to raise your prices. You have to write a contract. You have to ask people to put time in the ticket. You have to get a PSA, whatever it is. You have to do that. You're not going to wake up one day and suddenly all your clients have paid you in advance. It's just not going to happen. You have to make that happen. So the service manager needs to have really good skills and be able to implement all of that. And if you, as you can imagine, that takes a certain kind of brain. So one of the earlier slides was to hire slow and fire fast. If you find somebody who is not doing the job, you need to get rid of them. Either put them back down to being a technician or get rid of them altogether, but then you need to go find somebody who really has these skills. And so in interviewing, you need to ask questions like, you know, tell me about a time when you did this, that, and the other thing. And there are a handful of skills that are truly important. If you ask people, tell me about a time questions, then they have to tell a story. They can't say, oh yes, I'm really detail-oriented. You say, tell me about a time when being detail-oriented solved your problems, or tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a client and how you settled it. And then they have to, you know, sort of give you a sense about that. Storytelling is a great way to get information and to give information. So make sure that you build that into your process. So when you look at a IT shop, and I talked about how your administrative assistant should be the first hire, you go from basically having something where the owner does 100% of everything to something where now the owner's got some free time. And I'm always surprised when I find that, you know, people want to hire a technician as their first hire, because administratively, if you look at the low level work that you do, paying a technician to do that at $20 an hour or $17 an hour doesn't make much sense when you can get an administrative assistant to do it for $10 or $12 an hour. And there's a whole chunk of your business that an administrative assistant can do a spectacular job at and free up 10 or 20 hours a week for you to go do other things. So after that, you've got an admin at 10 or 20 hours, and then the owner is now partly sales, partly admin, and largely technical. And then this evolves over time. If your second hire is a service manager, then the owner gets to be 60% sales, right? So you've moved up essentially from 10% sales to 60% sales. And even if you don't like sales, you know, the classic way that we've always gotten business is we offer a free network analysis, right? They bring us in, so now somebody's invited us into their place, we get to see their stuff, we touch it, and we do an analysis, and then we have that conversation. So it doesn't feel like sales, it feels like a consulting conversation, but eventually they sign the contract. So even if that's your form of sales and you want to go really slow and grow your company, you can be very, very successful, and you'll be able to do it a lot more if you've handed off the technical management to a service manager. So now the admin is 100% admin, and the service manager is doing most of the technical and a little bit of the admin. And then your third hire would be additional technicians. So these are grinders. And again, you're going to be able to hire people at a very low level. Today, the average very small client, let's say 10 users, is going to have cloud services for their email, for their website, probably for their spam filtering. You're going to have an RMM tool that's going to include your antivirus, right? And maybe even your remote control. So you've got all of that stuff out there where it's essentially the only thing that's on site is your agent for your RMM. And so it doesn't take a network engineer who understands Exchange and SQL backwards and forwards in order to manage that environment. It's very, very easy. So you can hire entry-level folks, and if you've got your process nailed down, you can elevate their skills and help them to grow into that business. Does that make sense, everybody? Does anybody, oh, these guys don't agree.
Administrative tasks from the road. So for example, if I'm driving and I think of something I have to do, I just phone them and they enter it into my calendar for me. They can also handle other issues, and I'm training them to start entering tickets for me.
Right.
And they're very reasonable.
So let me just, for the folks who didn't hear the beginning, he said you don't have to hire an admin who comes to your office. You can hire a virtual admin and then manage them from the road.
It's worked out very well for me. I'm a solo shop, so it's really allowed me to leverage my time.
Yeah, and there's also outsourced bookkeeping services where your bills get emailed to them and they put them in your QuickBooks and they put in bill pays and you just log on and go click, click, click and pay them.
Question on the service manager. The one slide you said that they don't have to be that technical or the most tech savvy person. Help me understand it a little bit better. Say, for example, you have several techs. Right, I'm a three-man shop. So.
And just so you know, I think to begin with, your service manager is probably going to be the most technical person in the business. The owner doesn't have to be the most technical.
Okay, so the service manager is the most technical person in the business then. But on the one slide, you said that they didn't have to be the most technical person in the business.
Well, they don't have to be as long as you get somebody else who is super good at it.
Okay, yeah, because I guess I was trying to figure out if they're going to be looking over tickets and making sure that the techs are actually doing the job properly. I guess their skill set has to be much deeper than the techs actually doing the work, because how are they going to know if they did the work right or not?
Except, I mean, if you think about it, like, I don't have to know anything about SQL to know that you put in enough notes for me to justify your work to a client, right? So you have to have some technical ability, but you don't have to be the guru to manage whether or not somebody put in the right notes in a service ticket about SQL or Exchange or...
Yeah, and I get the notes aspect, but I'm just saying, how do they know that you remediated that virus issue properly, or you migrated that domain properly, or whatever the case is?
Again, early on, your service manager is going to be the most technical, because they're going to be the first line of support. All the technicians are going to call them, oh, I'm stuck, I need something.
Yeah, I need help. Help me out with this.
Yeah, that's the natural progression.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Eventually, if you've got like 50 people, you're going to have somebody who's the guru on VoIP and the guru on SQL and so forth. So She's going to run a microphone over there.
I guess there's no real guarantee on this, but if your service manager technically will have no one to manage when you first hire them because they're just your next employee, how are you going to guarantee that if you get additional techs, that person is actually the person who should be in management? They might be a great tech, the Peter principle, right? You promote
Right.
people up to their level of incompetence. So how can you try to
Yeah, I mean, that's
guarantee
part
that?
of it is you have to, again, that's why I like the DISC profile is good. If you get somebody who has managed people before, tell me about a time when you managed some people, right? You have to work to make sure, because you're right. If it's just you and one other person, it's going to be hard to know how well they really manage somebody unless you do some research. That's where the hire slow part comes in. One of the first jobs I ever had as a consultant, I managed the internal tech support for HP's plant in Roseville, California. So we had 5,000 desktops, and I had a staff of 25. The interviews for me to get that contract lasted 2 months. I literally was interviewed by one group after another from HP. Eventually, they flew people out from Chicago to interview me for that job. So they hired me very, very, very slowly, but they wanted to make sure that I could manage people and that I had an approach to managing people. And if I didn't demonstrate that, they would have gone and given the contract to somebody else. So it's the same kind of thing. I mean, you can't hire somebody and say, I know you've never managed anybody, but I think you'll be really good. That's probably not going to work out. So you're going to want to actually find somebody who's got experience and so forth. So, other questions before we move on?
Yeah, two questions actually. Should a service manager track her time and to what detail?
So
Should the
everybody in the
service
service
manager track her
manager,
time?
yeah, so should you track time? Everybody in the service department should track their time, including the service manager. I am a real big believer that everybody in the service department should track all of their time because you need to know how billable you are. If you don't track 100% of your time in your PSA or your service board, you will not know how billable everybody is. And by billable, for me, that definition is it's usable labor towards delivering support. So it might end up in an invoice or it might end up in just supporting a managed service contract, but you need to know how much labor did we spend on that managed service contract, so now we know whether or not it's profitable. How much labor did we put into that project so we know whether or not the project was profitable, right? So forth and so on. In general, I think a technician who works inside your office is going to be at most about 80% billable if they're 100% in the office. If they're running around the county, then you'll be lucky if they're 60% billable. A service manager is going to be around 40% billable. And you just have to know that. So what that means is the service manager is going to do a lot of other things, but at 40% billable, they're going to be able to deliver 16 hours of usable labor towards contracts and projects. So when you do your time estimates, you need to know that that's the case. And, thank you, sir. And if a technician is, say, 60% billable, that means they got 24 hours a week for actually delivering service. And you need to know that because let's just say it's 50%, right? 50% billable means I'm going to pay somebody for 2 hours for every 1 hour I'm able to bill a client. And if that's the deal on a project, if I've got a project that's going to take 10 hours, I have to plan I'm going to have to pay for 20 hours to be able to deliver 10 billable hours in order to get that project in place. So now I can calculate whether or not I'm profitable on that project. If you don't know these numbers, you literally can't tell me whether or not you're profitable. You can say at the end of the month, I paid this much money and I got that much money, but you may have lost money on several deals and not even known it. So I encourage you to track all of your time in your ticketing system, and that includes the service manager. So, another question here.
I got a question. Do you have a checklist that you have for like your technicians when, say you're doing managed services, so you're getting a certain amount of money coming in a month, right? And say it covers your nut, it covers everyone's salary, anything on top of that project, so that's profitable. So your techs are there 8 hours a day, and out of the 8 hours, they do 5 hours worth of tech work. The other 3 hours, what are they doing, right? do you have anything like where you say, hey, when you're not working on these issues, you are to do this. You are to look
Okay.
at firewall
There's
logs and all
two
sorts of
pieces
stuff.
to that. So one thing is they log all of their time, right?
So even if they're not doing anything,
Right.
I'm sitting here.
Well, they're never
not.
not doing anything. So that's say there's two pieces to it. So the first part is that in terms of what else they're doing, they're going to be in the staff meetings, the trainings. They're going to be, doing something at the tech bench, maybe cleaning it up or doing some education, right? There's all kinds of things to do besides that. If you don't charge for travel, the reason that the difference between in-house and out-house technicians are that the guy who's driving around the county, you're not billing, most of you are not billing for that travel time. And so, they're not billable during that period. So it doesn't take very much to burn up several hours a day if you drive around town. The second piece of the question is that we have internal tasks. So there are service tickets and there are internal tasks, and they're all high, medium, or low priority. So basically, the loop is that a technician checks their email and responds if it's appropriate, and then they take the highest priority, oldest ticket that they can work, and they work it as far as they can. And then they take the highest priority, oldest internal task that they can work, and they push that as far as they can. And then they loop back and to see whether or not they have something scheduled. We mostly don't schedule work, but in case there's something scheduled, they check to see if it's scheduled, check their email, work the highest priority ticket and the highest priority task, and that loop continues. Every single thing that needs to be done in your company needs to be in your service board. And it's the only way that you can look and see what your backlog is, right? If you say, in my backlog, there are, 152 tickets, and it's a total of 500 hours of labor, I know I have to come up with that 500 hours of labor. I know my service manager is 40%, and you're 80%, and he's 60%, right? I can literally calculate out what my backlog is and whether I have 3 weeks worth of work or 6 weeks worth of work lined up. I always want to have a backlog, because when I have zero backlog, I close the doors and go home, right? So you have to have a backlog. And if you have managed services, you've got monthly maintenance for all of these clients, and then you've got all the tickets for all the clients, so you can measure all that. And then you've got your internal tasks that have to be done. Again, if everything is in the service board, then you can get your arms around your business. Now, that is a big job, and it's why the service manager is only 40% billable, because they got to manage that. The service manager lives in the service board. The service manager literally opens the service board, and they know all these tickets, and I call it, massaging the service board. You start with, sorting by age and priority, and you make sure that we're getting attention to all of these things. Then you sort by customer, and you make sure one customer doesn't have a lot of outstanding issues, right? And then you sort based on the due date, right, to see if we got a bunch of really old tickets, right? The service manager's constantly massaging the service board and knows all the time kind of this 3D view about what's going on in the business. That takes a lot of work and a lot of skill, and that's why I say, remember this? That service manager's got to do all that and keep the morale up of the troops and give the training and keep the customers happy and answer the phone when people want to whine about stuff and make sure that the vendor's happy and, on and on and on. It's a really, really, really hard job. And so most of you have been doing this yourself. You just haven't thought about it in that kind of detail. And so as you move forward and think about how am I going to find a service manager, just remember you really need somebody who's got all of those skill sets, and that's really, really difficult to find. So in terms of being the super tech, the service manager is the primary technician. Okay? So you, the owner, are no longer going to be the super technician. And it is my experience that with modern tools, if you don't have Max or one of the other RMM agents out there, you are missing the boat. And I will tell you why. With modern tools, you can manage between 500 and 1,000 endpoints per technician with no problems. So if you have one of those tools, you can do that. If you don't, then you can't, period. End of story. But you also have to have processes and procedures. You need to do the monthly maintenance. And I have sat at a table just last month with somebody who said, I don't want to have those tools in place because I need my clients' stuff to break so I can stay in business. I'm like, oh. And I literally wanted to say, you are the problem, right? You are holding our entire industry back. So I hope that if somebody in this room believes that you know, you don't raise your hand because we will beat you up. So, but there are people who believe that, and then there's people who like they know they need good tools, they know they need good processes, but they're just too busy mopping up the floor to fix the hole in the roof, right? And I want you to really take today to be a day of action where you say, I will choose a tool, I will put processes in place, I will make out a roadmap so that in the next 12 months I move some things forward in my business, because it's not going to happen by itself, right? You're not going to wake up and suddenly, oh, we've got a monthly maintenance checklist for every one of our clients. It's just not going to happen. Oh, careful which finger you use. I have 1 minute, apparently. So send me an email, and I will send you a list of processes that you can improve. It's basically a tracking form, an Excel spreadsheet where you can log out. It's got 165 recommendations, and then it's got basically an Excel spreadsheet where you can say, this is the thing I'm going to do first, and second, and third, and so you can pick 50 things to track through the month, through the next year to improve your business. And so just send me an email, and I'll be happy to send that. Make sure you say, you know, you saw me at SMB Forum and so forth. All right. Any questions, or do we have time?
I got one more, please.
All righty.
Here we go.
One thing I want to touch on is that as you bring on more technicians, if their soft skills aren't trained the same way that you are as the president or owner of the company, what I'm finding is that we're getting new techs that they don't know how to properly close a ticket. They don't know the business process for resolving a ticket. You know, what happened with that ticket from 3 days ago? Oh, they needed memory. Well, you didn't tell anyone they needed memory.
Right.
Now, you know, the customer's upset. Or you went ahead and just purchased something. Or when you leave a site, you never spoke to the customer to say how all your issues are resolved. You just went in and left.
Right.
So those skills that you're talking about, what we're doing now is that we're more concerned with their soft skills, their customer service skills. Their technical skills are probably falling number 4 or 5 on the list, unless we can really train them. But that becomes very important as you bring in more people. They do not do it the same way that you do it, and they will upset customers.
Right.
And you know, cause you to lose because they are your final line of defense. But
Absolutely.
it becomes very important.
And the way that you deliver service is your brand, right? So you want people who do check in and check out and do put notes in the system. That's part of the brand of your business. So, all right. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Carl Palachuk. Thanks so much, Carl.